You're tuned to 1520 WCHE Radio, and it's time now for the Avid Reader Show with your host, Sam Hankin. Sam will offer reviews and interviews of some of the more interesting books and authors of today, and now, Sam Hankin.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Avid Reader. I'll do my blah blah thing now. It's brought to you by Wellington Square Bookshop, which is my bookshop, my independent bookshop, and I'm so happy that all of you have helped us be voted the best bookshop in Philadelphia, which is I'm so proud of. And also, for some strange reason, you voted us the best bookshop on the best coffee shop on the main line, which I can't imagine. It's hard for me to imagine why, but thank you very much about that too. So today, we're lucky enough to have with us Rebecca Scherm, who went to NYU, teaches now at the University of Michigan, just published her first novel last month. She's written for many periodicals, but published her first novel last night, which is Unbecoming. Well, no, that's the name of the book, Unbecoming. And this is her first novel, and it's a mystery thriller, psychological, incredibly good book. I really enjoyed reading it. And thanks so much for joining us today, Rebecca.
Oh, thanks so much for having me.
I saw you, like I was mentioning before we started, I saw you on the trailer on Penguin's First Flight, and you seemed like such a nice person. And also, I also decided that when you said Snacks in the Stacks, I think that's a great name for either a rock and roll group or a kid's book.
Yeah, or a coffee shop, cum bookshop, if you don't mind people snacking in your stacks.
No, I do have stacks. I have library ladders and stacks. Okay. Well, actually, I do mind them doing that. You were right. Okay. We'll take that away. So, anyway, so you have tons of characters, and sometimes I get carried away and I don't let you tell the story. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your book and how it came about?
Well, the book is about a young woman named Grace and her many, many transformations from this little girl who's sort of tragically anxious to please into a very self-possessed and self-willed adult criminal. She and her husband, her childhood sweetheart, plan and execute this heist in their hometown, and it goes badly, and the boys, he commits the heist with his friends for the most part, get caught, and she flees, so she gets away with it. And the novel opens on the eve of the boys' parole, when she's sort of looking at the detritus of her life and trying to figure out where on earth she can possibly go from here. So it's a psychological suspense novel, but it's also really a character study. One of the things that I was trying to do from the beginning was understand the type of the femme fatale as not a type, as a real person. I had grown up very comfortable with the femme fatale as a type because I read all this noir fiction as a kid and watched all this Hitchcock. And when I got older and, learned that people aren't types, I started to feel a little bit prickly about the femme fatale as a type. Her motivations are always so simple and so clear. And I thought, if this is really a real woman, she'd be a very complicated person. And I want to tell the story of how she came to be.
It's funny because, you have spoken about Grace Kelly and how much you admired her, and the admixture that you created in this character is what I think sets this book apart from so many other psychological thrillers. And, I know from what you've talked about that you admired Dashiell Hammett and Hitchcock movies, and you even name your character, or she names herself, Grace, for Grace Kelly. I
named her after Grace Kelly.
Yeah, and the combination of Grace and this other person, what's interesting and troubling, I guess, for many readers, including me, is that you have this character who, you've said she's a criminal. You say that she has to pick up the detritus of her life. But as a reader, you feel incredibly sympathetic towards her.
Yeah.
And you like her. You like her a lot. And then at the same time, the things she does, and the other thing is, are we dealing with an unreliable narrator here, or are we dealing with the most reliable narrator you've ever read?
I love that question. I mean, for me, the challenge of Grace as a character, I mean, she's the reason that the book exists. She's the reason for everything.
She's the reason for everybody in the book.
Yeah. I mean, I think I was trying to understand someone who would seem very real to me. Someone, a lot of my favorite sort of noir fiction or sort of literary suspense, Patricia, Highsmith, etc., deals with sociopaths. And I love reading about sociopaths, but I have no interest in writing one. To me, that seems sort of like we've answered the question before we've begun. Oh, this character has no conscience, so he or she can do anything. And with Grace, I was after a much more sort of uncomfortable challenge because in every situation, her conscience is talking to her. She decides whether or not to listen to it, but she does feel very deeply, and we as the readers really can't help but feel with her.
But then she fools herself sometimes.
Yeah.
So she fools herself.
Yes,
sometimes she fools herself. Sometimes she knows exactly what she's doing and maybe eventually embraces it completely. And then sometimes she's like the sweetest person around. And then what happens is, here I go talking. What happens is, okay. So what happens is, you have these characters, Riley and Alls and Greg, and like I said, she makes things happen. It doesn't seem like she is, but she makes things happen. Even with Jacqueline and with Hannah, she makes their lives change completely. And so not only does the book center around and Alls, I mean, God, it's and the way you do it, the reason, without like flattering you, the reason it's so cool is because you do it while the reader is kind of along for the ride and wondering. And like what you said was, you don't like books that have kind of like a happy ending, whereas like I've said this before on the show, my brother, he likes books that the end is like a Christmas present where it's in a box and it's wrapped and it has a bow.
Oh God, not me.
Me neither. And I want to leave the book either having to work or being able to realize that there is something that's going to happen, and there definitely is something that's going to happen at the end of this book and years later. I don't know what it is. And
yeah, and I think about, I always knew the feeling that I was going to end the book with, and I can talk about this without spoiling it. I was working for this feeling. The books that I love are books that don't leave me settled. They're books that leave me feeling profoundly sort of disoriented, like they've taken me out of the world for a time. And if you tie everything up at the end in a bow, well, they've just plopped you right back down where you started. And I knew I was never going to write a book like that. And Grace herself, she seems to the people around her initially, everyone underestimates her. And sometimes she even underestimates herself as a tool for doing what she wants. I'm just this little person. And for her to go through the book and become this, and for the reader to understand that she's becoming this force, and she leaves this huge wake behind her wherever she goes, is alarming and disturbing for me to write it, and I hope for readers to read it. And so where I want to leave those readers is a feeling of, on a rocking boat looking out at the horizon and trying to understand what is going to happen after this.
It's funny. It's all that's true, but you know how I felt at the end of the book? Nervous.
Good.
I was nervous.
Good.
I mean, he's laying prone and doing his thing, and I'm thinking, oh, geez. It's like the Hitchcock movies. It's like, To Catch a Thief, right? Is it To Catch a Thief or to?
Yeah, although my story with To Catch a Thief is a little, it's a little messed up.
Well, you didn't like To Catch a Thief as much as you liked Rear Window, though.
No, I didn't. But the thing is that I didn't remember that. So when I was a little kid and I was obsessed with Grace Kelly, I watched Rear Window so many times, and Rear Window is a perfect movie for children and adults. It sort of has all the voyeurism and spying, and I don't know. There's a way it maps perfectly onto a children's world.
But it didn't work at your birthday party, though.
No, it didn't work. Well, they did. Yeah, they weren't ready to do the mapping. This movie is essentially about being grounded and spying on the neighbors. But when I took up To Catch a Thief after that, and I watched it so many times, I think I was watching it I was imbuing it with a depth and an ugliness that it really doesn't have, that it resists intentionally. And I misremembered the whole movie. I didn't watch it for about 20 years. And then when I was finishing this book, and I'd been saying to friends, I'm trying to write this thing, and it's sort of inspired by To Catch a Thief, and I'd been saying that for years, and then I finally rewatched the movie and realized I had totally screwed it up. I thought that at the end of To Catch a Thief, Francie, the Grace Kelly character, and Roby, the Cary Grant character, ran off and became jewel thieves together. They became cat burglars together, and that's not what happens at all. What happens is that Christmas package ending, they settle down together in his house in the south of France and become law-abiding citizens, and the mother-in-law moves in. And when I saw that, I just felt so, like my own imagination on one hand had sort of betrayed me. My memory had betrayed me. On the other hand, I'd made up something that I liked a lot better, that I thought was a lot truer and uglier and more interesting. And that was sort of the inspiration, this fake movie that I'd made up.
Well, it's funny, that's what we do with people, too.
Yeah.
And that's why there's wars, I guess. I mean, it's just misunderstanding. And what's interesting about what you did to correct what you perceive as some flaw in your understanding is you actually put the movie in the book.
Yeah. Yeah, and
she goes, oh no. She goes, oh no, not this.
Not this again. Yeah, and because for me that movie is such a nostalgic object, and I think part of what I'm doing, what many writers are doing when they're writing fiction, is you're sort of reappropriating some of your own feelings and your own special things. Like Grace's relationship with To Catch a Thief is totally different from mine. But
yes.
There's some trigger there for her. And that was sort of a way of me to sort of pay tribute to this movie.
What about stuff
such a weird relationship with?
Yeah, if you're taking stuff from your life, which you always are, but like with Hannah telling Grace and chastising her kind of for her lies, who are you? Are you Hannah? Are you Grace? Have you ever found yourself in a situation, I mean I have, where a little lie has ended up turning into something that I never thought it would turn into? Or
yeah, I mean, it's funny that you say that. The only places in the book where I see myself talking, I hear my own voice, are in the conversations with Grace and Hannah, where Hannah is just furious with her, and in a way, I mean, that was my way of confronting the character. I needed some way to get angry with Grace. And so I came at her toward Hannah.
A psychologist could have a field day with that one.
Yeah. And the character of Hannah, I mean, otherwise she's nothing like me. But, writers sort of find themselves popping up, in places that you don't expect. I'm not like Grace. I'm not like Hannah. I'm not like any of the characters, but I see little glimmers of myself. Things that everyone says.
What about the fact that Hannah, even though she's angry and has these feelings, what about the fact that she's coldly quiet and courteous, notwithstanding the feelings, rather than screaming and yelling at her? Is that like you?
No. No, not at all. I hold nothing back. No, I'm very expressive, and I pretty much say what I think, and I'm very concerned with diplomacy at the same time, and I'm really nothing like Hannah. And so maybe that was why I did that. Maybe I made her someone who really isn't anything like me, to sort of give myself a way to say some of the things that I wanted to say to Grace.
What about a wonderful family like the Grahams?
Oh, well, I mean, I think that's like, it's this little feeling that a lot of people recognize, but blown out to these extreme proportions. I mean, most of us had that family growing up, like one of your friends' families, where all the kids would hang out at that house.
Right.
Like there was something about that house or that family that drew you. And I mean, I certainly had that. For me, it was my friend Tara. We were always at her house, and so I had a little bit of that feeling. And then I remember talking with a friend long ago about, I don't remember how it came up, but I was telling her that my very first boyfriend, like very meaningless, little two month relationship or something, if you can call it that. And when we broke up, I was just so bummed that I wasn't going to see his mom and his dog anymore. He had this great mom, and he had this amazing Labrador named Booger, who would go on hikes with us. And I mean, Booger was the coolest dog. And I mean, I knew then that there was something off about that. That I was distraught about the dog. And those little, you sort of put all of those feelings into your sack, and then 10 or 15 years later, get them out and re-examine them and find out what you can turn them into.
Well, the real sainthood about the Grahams, and maybe it was too saintly, was the fact that they, without spoiling it, they kind of knew certain things and nonetheless still loved her and gave her. And also, that was really interesting, the way that Grace justified that envelope, the way she justified that. That was
I find that heartbreaking. That scene where Mrs. Graham confronts her about the envelope is by far the hardest scene emotionally that I've ever written in anything that I've ever written ever.
Hey, I'm pretty good that I hit on these things.
Yeah, you're a good reader. I was messed up for days over that scene.
Really?
Yeah, for me, it's really the bloody beating heart of the book.
Yeah, I would say exactly the same. It's where it's a pivotal point because she totally justifies it. And that's where that's the part where she's fooling herself, right there, the envelope. She's, she bought the present, whatever. It's just, she just totally fools herself there. And then after that, it changes. It pivots after that point.
Yeah, and this was always one of the tensions with her character and with many of the other characters, the kind of the sadness and the aspiration of when you can fool yourself into thinking you are the person you wish you were, and when you can't fool yourself into thinking you're that person, when you're really just stuck being your regular self.
That's scary.
And all the characters are dealing with that in some way. Probably every character I write is always dealing with that.
No, Greg isn't. He's just
Greg.
He's just
he's very comfortable with himself.
I can't say the word that he is. They get mad at me when I do that.
Yeah, he's one of the few characters who's very comfortable in his
Yeah, he doesn't say it doesn't bother him at all.
Right. The Kim Broner. He's cool.
But I mean, the way she perceives love. There's your relationship, your first 2-month relationship, except theirs extends.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly wasn't thinking about that. I mean, I don't think I used that there. But something that haven't been interested in, maybe, my husband is a sociologist, and for a long time, while I was writing this book, he was doing a lot of work in performativity, this idea that if we sort of counsel ourselves and say that what we're doing, like sort of declare our behavior, we sort of change the meaning of our behavior to ourselves. And I had been thinking a lot about the performative utterance, that in a wedding, when you say, I do, that change, you just said something. All you did was you said these 2 little words, 3 letters, and that changes something that's real, that's beyond language. And I sort of let this idea snowball in my mind, was thinking about all of the ways in our lives that we are engaging in this sort of performance that's not true and that's not a lie, or rather it's something that becomes true because we work at it, sort of the sort of heavy emotional extension of the expression fake it till you make it. That I think Grace really does love Riley in the way that she understands at that point. But because she is someone who believes that love is something that you practice.
Well, I mean, it's 6th grade too. I mean,
for sure. How does she certainly hasn't been thunderstruck yet. Hopefully, that doesn't happen to most of us until later.
I like when you said, and Grace. I mean, Grace's mother. Geez, but I mean, I like when the twins are Iden and Dryden, and you said it was an aspirational and slant rhymed.
Yeah. Ouch.
I know.
Good burn, Grace.
But yeah, it's like when you talk about Riley and then you talk about Alls, what happens when you, as you pronounce it, Alls or Alls?
Alls.
Alls.
Yeah.
When you talk about
it's
Alls.
meant to be pronounced with a really round Southern drawl.
Yeah. Alls. So where in the South are you from? Not Tennessee, but.
I'm from Kentucky.
Okay. So what was I going to say? Oh yeah, so Alls. I mean, that's where Grace really gets going. I mean.
Yeah.
And then the reader is like going, well, you know, the feeling, and you know, that's also with the sex scenes. You do the sex scenes really well because you don't go too far, but you go just far enough. I'm thinking of a particular description where you go just far enough that you know how badly Grace wants to be with him.
Yeah.
Were those hard to write?
Yeah, they are hard to write. I think sex scenes are hard to write, and yet when I have finished one, I feel triumphant. I feel like I've pulled off a magic trick or something. In a way that a lot of the other writing feels like you're feeling your way through a cave, or sometimes if there's this really big emotional scene, like the one with Grace and Mrs. Graham, I sort of have to work myself up to it over several days before I let it pour out. But with a sex scene, like you know you're writing something that's going to be tricky, because readers all respond to sex scenes differently, and I've certainly been in the middle of a book that I was loving, and then I thought they didn't land the sex scene, and I was just like, oh Christ. And so when I'm writing a sex scene, I feel a little bit like I'm on a tightrope. And if I can just get across the tightrope without falling into whatever's underneath, then I will be like, there will be triumph, victory, there will be trumpets.
So
that's how I feel when I finish one.
Yeah, you're like the Philippe Petit of sex scenes. I mean, it's good because what you do is you create a feeling in the reader without having to be overly graphic, and that even creates, in that kind of scene, more tension for the reader. And more tension for the protagonists as well.
Yeah, I mean, something that I've thought a lot about is the words that other writers use in sex scenes, specifically the words they use for physical detail, for bodies.
Yeah, his pulsing member.
Yeah, exactly. And like, think about how many times you've been reading something and they use the wrong word. They use a word that is not a word that you think that they should use, or there's something about it that's off. For me, that can really just yank me out of the narrative. For a while, I was like making a list of National Book Award winners and Pulitzer Prize winners and all of the words that they used for genitalia, trying to understand. I was trying to sort of like map it out. But then, I got stuck in Philip Roth, and I felt like I needed to be done with this project.
Well, I had this friend who wrote this book, and he asked me to edit it, and one of the sex scenes was concluded with, and they came within minutes of each other. I said, no, Paul, no, that doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
Have you ever had sex?
Revisit this.
Well, plus they were making love on a coverlet that was it was pictures of the solar system, like Saturn and, Uranus.
Oh, my gosh.
But it was very bad. So, if Grace is this person that some would say evil, and some would say misguided, troubled, or mistaken, or
broken. I hear broken sometimes.
Broken. She's not broken at all. I don't think. Mm-hmm. You do, right? Because it's detritus.
Well, yes and no. For me, I am endlessly interested in hearing readers describe Grace back to me. It's fascinating, both how they describe her as a person, how they sort of describe her core, and how they describe her attitudes about love. I love hearing that. I can't, as her creator, I have trouble describing her in anything other than the book that I wrote. It took me all of those pages to describe Grace. I have found that I am unable to reduce it.
Do you miss her?
I don't miss her. I think about where she is. I think about what she's doing. But Grace and I spent a long time together, and a lot of that time was really hard. I had thought when I started writing this book that because the character was so different from me, and she hurt so many people, that I would feel safe. I would feel safe from her, that it wouldn't get to me. But spending that much time trying to understand her, it was hard.
I like to think that I understand her because I see some of me in her.
I think we all do. I'm very suspicious of people who see nothing of themselves in Grace. I think they're lying to themselves.
Well, I think if you can admit that you do, I think that's makes you actually a better person. But
yeah, I agree.
And the funny thing is, too, is that throughout the book, she performs almost flawlessly, even if she's pretending like she's not. But there's one situation where she really gets screwed, and there's a physical stigmata of that. And it's funny because in my mind, I rewrote that scene completely. And
what did you do to it?
Can I tell you? Is that all right?
Yeah.
Well, I had her, because it took the guy, he had the bolt cutters, and it took him a while to break the chain. So I figured, this wouldn't make the book work better, but it's what I did. I figured she had enough time, so she had thoughtfully bought a gun before all this happened, and she knew because where she was that they could easily come after her. So when he came in, she did that, and did it slowly. and I had it all in my head. And then I thought, no, that's totally wrong. It would never work that way because then the book changes completely. But I did do that.
You wanted her. You didn't want. Yeah.
I didn't want her to make a mistake. I didn't want her to be in a situation where she had screwed up completely, because she doesn't screw up.
Yeah.
She doesn't screw up. Yeah, she did. But she wouldn't.
Just a kid.
She wouldn't screw up again, though.
Yeah. Not after that.
Nope.
Yeah, and that scene, if I tell you that the scene with Mrs. Graham was the hardest emotionally for me to write, I will tell you that scene was perversely the most fun.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if you could do that with the. I don't know if you could do that with the wire cutters. I mean, the bolt cutters.
I had a lot of discussions. I had a lot of discussions with my husband about that one, where we were one of us would be imitating the bolt cut. He would have the bolt cutters out, and we would sort of be trying to block out the scene.
Did you actually have real? Did you actually have real bolt cutters? Did you have your hair in a ponytail?
I don't remember if he had real bolt cutters, if he just, because I don't know what the tools are in our house, or if he just had a tool that was shaped like bolt cutters.
That's hilarious.
We were trying to sort of block out the scene and understand it, and every now and then still one of us will turn to the other one and say, "But how will you pay for your Kaiserschmarrn?"
And then he says, "And you have a nice day."
Right.
That must have been fun writing that line.
It was. That one was fun.
Well, so the fact that the transformation in Alls goes back to your movies. It goes back to your movies, the way that they end up being these two performance artists.
Yeah.
And I thought, okay, at first I thought when that was happening and when he first came over, and I thought, well, and I guess you're leaving it up to the reader to go, what the heck? What's he going to do? Is he going to do this? Is he going to do this? Is he going to do this? And you didn't telegraph it at all. I didn't think he was going to do that.
I don't think he knew what he was going to do.
Really?
No. I really believe that he was expecting to find someone very different. That he had seen her perform.
Well, he said that
so beautifully.
He said that twice.
Yeah. Alls is very honest, and I'm very interested in I was always very interested in surrounding Grace with characters who were more like her than she initially thought. In some ways, Hannah is more like her. Jacqueline is more like her. The girls, the girls at NYU are more like her. Donald Moss is more like her than she wants them to be, or than she thought. But Alls is someone who I think she thinks is a lot like her, and in some ways she is. But in that moment, he's not.
Well, that's the other thing for the reader. In the pivotal moment, after he rejoins her, the question is, did she just do that? Did she just do that?
Did she make that happen?
Yeah.
Or did he make that happen?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought about it. I mean, she's past the point where that would bother her, I think. So, but it doesn't make any difference, really. They both... That's the idea about life, is if you give into something completely, no matter what it is, it makes things a lot easier. Yeah.
I've had readers... one friend was sort of uncomfortable, and a lot of people are made uncomfortable by the book, as they should be. For me, that means I've done it well.
Definitely.
But I remember one person saying to me, like, looking really disturbed, and saying that she just wasn't sure that Grace and Alls really loved each other. She was worried that they were using each other, and she looked at me like she was looking for comfort. And I mean, I know what I believe. But that I treasure that discomfort too much to answer that question perfectly in the book.
It's, there's a couple of ways you can tell your book is really good. One is you can imagine a book club where the people actually climb over the table to throttle each other.
Yeah, I think people are going to fight about it.
Yeah, and we have book clubs at our bookshop, and I don't ever join them. No guys are in book clubs. We haven't had one guy in any of our book clubs.
Yeah, that's true.
And
I've learned that recently.
Yeah, so I hide behind the stacks where I'm snacking, and I watch them, and it's really interesting because they get angry at each other.
Yeah.
And I don't, I could be chauvinistic about it, but it's just there aren't any men there. So, and the other way you can tell if a book is really good, and this is why you should know a book is really good, because you'll agree, is that if you remember everybody's names like 5 years later. Like, I won't forget Grace, and I won't forget Riley and Alls and Greg.
Thank you.
And Jacqueline and Hannah. I can't remember the guy who she went to the house with, where the old lady was, and all they found was junk. And
Donald.
Yeah, Donald. That was the one.
Yeah, but that's just an interlude.
Yeah. It's
okay if Grace and Alls and Riley and Hannah are the ones who stick with you.
And her landlady, Frond.
Madame Friendemetz.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. She was another bitch, but she was. Yeah. And what was she doing in her room? What the hell was she doing there all the time?
Yeah. I mean.
Really.
Don't go poking around in your tenant's stuff.
And Grace got upset, and she put that lock on. But anyway. See, and that's the other thing, is that we're talking about them like they're real.
Yeah. And for years I did that, and that was something that hadn't. This is my first novel, and I don't do that when I'm writing, say, a short story. But for years I would talk about these people like they were people I knew. I was just trying to help them work out their problems. The difference is that when it's your friends, you're trying to help them work out their problems in a way that is beneficial for them. And when it's your characters, you're not. You don't always have their best interests at heart. It's sort of like being a bad friend. But I would still talk about them like they were people I knew, and I feel like they are. You definitely sound, when you talk about Grace, you definitely sound like you know her. I mean, that you know her as a person. Yeah, I mean, and part of that is most of that is me spending so much time with the character. But I think that a lot of what makes us so uncomfortable and compelled by her is that we all known someone a little bit like her. Why do liars lie? And I was just trying to understand that. If you've ever had to sort of deal with a liar. Some liars lie because it's entertaining, and I like the liars who do that. If they have a story to tell you, but it's not that good, but then they embellish it, I like that. More power to them. It's like, it's great. Yeah. And then some liars lie because it's really convenient and makes things a lot easier. But why do they lie? Why do you think they lie? I think that they lie because they fear having love taken away from them. Really? Yeah, and I think that, and this is what I've learned, and this is just what I've learned from Grace. I think that they lie because even in a little moment where it doesn't even seem like there's any love to lose, that habit is still there. That habit of trying to please, because you don't want to displease, because then you'll lose the love. I don't know. When she reaches up to the ceiling in All's room, that's not that. No, definitely not. That's something else. Yep. Yep. But
Yeah, it's really phenomenal how I remember this book. Different, definitely different for me. I've interviewed 200 authors, and this is definitely different.
Well, that's great. It's sticking to you. That's terrific. I'm so happy to hear it.
Yeah, it really is. And I mean, it's happened a lot in with a lot of authors, but this is different because I really do feel like we're talking about people that either we know or that we know exist.
Yeah.
And that definitely changes things. So I guess, you could write a sequel because people would want you to write a sequel, but I don't think you should.
No. And, I want, when people ask me that, I tell them, the truth is that, I do think about the characters. I think about what would happen.
That's better.
But I'm not going to write a sequel.
It's better to leave, even if the reader's upset about it, it's better to leave the reader that way.
Well, that's the whole point.
I mean, I know what's going to happen.
I'm sorry to say that I'm, I'm with Kurt Vonnegut, that the role of the writer is to entertain. But since so many of my favorite books are books that make me argue with myself and left me unsettled, that was always my reason for doing this. And if people are uncomfortable and with their uncertainty, good. So am I.
I know what's going to happen to them. But Kurt Vonnegut is different because, towards the end, well, not even towards the end, he's inserting himself in the book.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you probably won't do. Maybe you will do that.
I don't think I'm ever going to do that.
What about something like magical realism? Can you see yourself doing that?
I dabbled in it as a youngster, as many youngsters do. No, I don't. But something that I think I will do, and I'm doing sort of in my next project, is that I think that I might always be interested in pushing up against a genre. Like Unbecoming, it's not really a thriller.
No.
It's not. It's a character study that's sort of pushing up against our expectations of a thriller. And it's me trying to sort out some of my expectations about heist novels and sort of heist narratives. And in my next book, I'm doing that with sort of a different genre. Like I'm poking at it and saying, well, what is it about this that interests me? And what is it about this that I feel like I have to untangle? And so that might be something that I'm always doing.
The key to this one is that you created two people from one, and that's what drives the book, in my opinion.
Thank you.
That there's, and you talked about it a little bit in that thing that Penguin does. That you and Grace Kelly is one of them, and the Femme Fatale is the other.
Yeah.
And but somehow it's seamless, and that's what definitely drives the book. That it's seamless, and that's where the reader has to either make the book his or her own, or has to stay outside the book. And once you get in, then it's a lot easier to understand. It's a lot easier to enjoy.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I could go on blabbing. Sorry I talk so much. I do.
This has been great. I have really enjoyed. I've enjoyed talking about the book more with people than I thought that I would. I sort of thought, I would feel protective of it, or well, it's all in the book. What is there to say? But no, I've really enjoyed hearing what people have to say about it.
Well, it's funny because
live out there.
When you did that little trailer thing, you were asking people to join you October 25th, which was 3 or 4 months before the book was published, and then you're now famous. You'll be famous. You'll option this to DreamWorks if you haven't already.
Oh, Lord.
And then you got to think of who's going to play who. Although I can kind of think of some of them.
That's been a fun cocktail conversation over the last month. Everybody wants to talk about that.
But so has it really changed a lot? Changed your life a lot?
I paid off my student loans.
Oh, that's cool.
And to tell you the truth, that has I would curse infinitely to describe the feeling of that. It was like in the scene of Jurassic Park where the velociraptors are scratching at the kitchen door.
Uh-huh.
If I were that little blonde girl and I pulled out a shotgun, that's how it felt to me. And that's a big change. But the big artistic change is that I feel confident in my ability to write a novel. like, oh, I can do this. I know how hard it is, and I know how long it takes, and I know how much it will wring me out.
Yeah, but you've always been confident.
But I know that I can do it now.
Definitely. That's a good way to end it. I mean, our interview.
Yeah.
Okay, well, so anyway, I really enjoyed the book. I really enjoyed talking to you. Thanks for being so candid, and thanks for bearing with me.
Oh, thank you. No, it was a pleasure.
Okay. So, that was Rebecca Scherm, and me being my usual awkward and fawning self. In any event, her book, Unbecoming, a novel, which is a psychological thriller, mystery kind of. Well, it's not really a mystery. It's a psychological thriller. And even she says it's not really a thriller. But it was just published January 22nd by Viking. It's really, really, really good, as you could tell when I was talking about it. It's, definitely a different kind of book. And I wasn't going to, I don't read mysteries and thrillers. But when the ARC came in, the advanced reader copy, and I read it, Rebecca told me to read it, and as usual, she's right. And when I read it, it just drew me in, and there was no way you were going to stop me from reading it. And as I said, the characters were alive to me, and that makes such a difference when you're reading a book. So thanks for joining us today. Thanks for joining us every week for what I consider to be really engaging discussions with some really good authors. Upcoming guests include Catherine Haney, Emma Walsh, and Matteo Pericoli, who wrote this really good book about what authors see when they look out their windows when they're writing, which you wouldn't think was a big deal, but when you read it and look at the pictures, you realize it kind of changes the way you look at things. It changes the way you look out your own window and what you see, because most people don't. Most people don't look up. They don't see the moon. They don't see the stars. You ask them, oh, did you see the moon last night? No, because they didn't look at it. Well, they just look straight ahead. That's what your life is. And he writes a lot about New York. And that's what people do in New York. They have their iPhone. They're listening. They walk forward. They don't see people. They don't see things. And that's what this book tries to disengage from. I think what I will take away from it is that saying that you can't see the forest for the trees. He lets you see the trees for the forest because it's outside of a window and the window has a frame on it. Okay, enough. Anyway, thank you so much for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you here next week.
You've been listening to the Avid Reader Show with your host, Sam Hankin. Sam will be back next week with reviews and interviews of some of the more interesting books and authors of today.